Story 3. Evergreen Tree, Connor. The whistle behind you. There are people who choose silence because they are running away from noise. But sometimes, the quietest thing is the scariest. Connor slammed the door behind him, as if he were locking out a bad week. It was Friday, 5 p.m., and the last of the golden sunlight was creeping across the low hills west of town, faint light filtering through the dusty windows of the cabin he was temporarily renting. For nearly a month now, Connor has lived in this countryside, a place more than 80 miles away from the city. He took a job doing civil engineering for a new highway project. The salary is not bad. The colleagues are not unpleasant. But nothing could fill the empty feeling he had been carrying since his wordless breakup with his girlfriend of 4 years. She left as if Connor never existed. A message, no explanation, nothing. Since that day, all the noise becomes too much. He hates the sound of the drill. Hates the sound of arguments during lunchtime. Hate my own voice when I try to pretend everything's fine. And so he decided to withdraw from it all. At least for 2 days. Connor has a simple plan. This weekend, he will go into the woods alone, set up camp, light a fire, sleep under the stars, and turn off all connection to the world. No phone, no network, no colleagues, no one. There is only nature, and you. Saturday morning, he woke up at 6 o'clock. The sky is ash gray. Waves of light fog roll around the valley like a thin blanket covering the surface of the lake. Connor packed his things: sleeping bag, small tent, utility knife, a flashlight, some protein bars, and drinking water. He wrote a note left on the table. Go to the forest, come back Sunday night, don't worry, see. Then he locked the door, put his backpack on his shoulder, and walked onto the trail that ran past the edge of the temporary housing area. That road leads in a part of primeval forest that few people set foot on. Largely because the terrain is steep and there is no phone signal. For Connor, that is the ideal. As he passed the edge of the forest, he took a deep breath. Clean air, the smell of tree sap, rotting leaves and damp earth filled my lungs. I feel peaceful for the first time in weeks. The first steps on the soft ground. The sound of dry branches cracking under his heels. And his heartbeat slowing down as he began to withdraw yourself from the noisy world behind. Around noon, Connor stopped next to a small field of land, a place large enough to pitch a tent and surrounded by tall trees. He hadn't seen anyone since leaving the main road. And that's a good thing. He lit a fire on some dry branches, cooked packet soup, and sat watching the fire crackling in the middle of the forest. The only sounds were the wind passing through the treetops and the birds in the distance. Turn off your phone. Leave the watch in your backpack. Everything inside Connor started to calm down. No more things to do or people to call back. There is only the present and silence. But as the afternoon wore on, and the sunlight faded through the leaves, Connor began to feel it a different kind of silence. Not peaceful, which is empty. The campfire gradually became smaller. The wind stopped blowing. Even the sounds of insects began to fade away as if someone were there turned down the volume of the forest. Connor suddenly felt his skin prickling. He reassured himself, maybe it's because of the cold. But intuition told me, something was wrong. He stood up and walked out of the light of the fire. The forest was now as dark as pitch, with only a little light reflecting from the gloomy sky. He took a few steps out to the small trail. Just to check. Nothing. He turned back. But at that moment, there was a small sound behind me, like a very light rustle. Connor stopped walking. Strain your headphones. Nothing. Probably due to the wind. Or squirrel. But his heart is still beating stronger than usual. He went back to the tent, closed the zipper, pulled his sleeping bag up to his neck, and lay there. No phone, no flashlight, no music. Just a lonely man in the middle of a deep forest, with hundreds of miles of complete emptiness around him. For the first time in his life, Connor wasn't sure he really wanted so much quiet. Movie camera, have you ever felt like you needed to run away from everything, to a far away, very lonely place, to live slowly? Connor did it, but what he didn't know was, there are places that are quieter. The more you hear things you never want to hear. Right finger subscribe to the channel after 0 hours to follow the next part. When Connor realized I'm not really alone in the forest. Thumbs up like if you've ever felt like the world is too noisy. But too deep a silence also makes you cold. Speech balloon comment if you think Connor should have listened to his intuition sooner. Repeat button share to remind someone. Stillness is not always liberating. Sometimes, it's an invitation from a place you shouldn't enter. Because forests are not just trees. The forest still retains what people forget, and sometimes, it will remind you to come back. In the deep forest, smoke doesn't always mean people. Sometimes, it's just a warning that you should turn around while there's still time. Connor tightened his grip on the backpack strap as he stepped off the small trail, heading west, where the afternoon sunlight was filtering through the trees. I don't know why I turned. It may be the feeling of wanting to find a more private place to camp. Maybe it was the smell in the wind that made him curious. The smell of burning wood. Not strong, not as intense as fresh smoke and fire. Which's smoldering smell, like coal that had burned many hours ago, still lingered in the low air among the bushes. Connor stopped, raised his head, eyes narrowed. It's true. Yes, thin smoke circling up from behind a mound. He had never seen another person in the forest since the beginning of his journey. No one has a reason to light a campfire in the middle of the day. Then, who left the fire? Part of him wanted to return to the main trail. But another part, the part that had brought him deep into the woods to hide from the world, want to know. And so he continued. Connor walked slowly, step by step through the dry leaves and broken branches under his feet. The air became heavier, as if there was a layer of something hanging between the tree trunks. The birds were chirping in the forest on the other side, now complete silence. As he stepped through the low ferns, the sight that appeared before him made his heart skip a beat. An empty land, but it's not like a normal campsite. In the middle of the land there is one black stone circle. Like the place where the fire used to be. The ash was still smoldering, emitting a thin smoke, mixed with the smell of burning plastic. Connor walked slowly closer, eyes wandering around, and then he saw them. A supermarket trolley, not on the ground, which is hanging on the tree, tied with many dull brown ropes that were rotten and damp as if they had been there for a long time. The car was distorted, one wheel was broken, and the handle was covered with something dry and hard, black and smelling bad. Connor turned his head, and saw three other carts, hanging from 3 different tree trunks, forming a triangle around the burned ground. Every car has a rope tied along the body resembles a human figure, with fake, or real, bones scattered about. Connor shivered. The feeling of curiosity disappeared. Only left quiet uneasiness is spreading throughout my body. But what makes him turn around quickly? Not the cars. Which is 2 objects lying in the middle of a pile of ashes. One plastic duck yellow. The type commonly found in baby bathtubs, but has been blackened. Deformed. The head is distorted as if screaming silently. Next to it is a baby doll. Hairless. Missing a leg. And his face was also scorched, his eyes were still intact. Glaring as if he had been left in the middle of a fire. Connor took a step back. Older brother no longer feel alone. The wind began to pick up slightly. The foliage rustled, but that sound no longer natural. It was like a whisper from many voices, that you cannot understand. But it is certainly not the wind. He turned around, intending to quickly walk back to the trail. But his heart suddenly sank when his eyes caught another small detail. A hanger made of copper wire, attached to the nearest tree trunk. On the hook is a small piece of fabric, light pink, embroidered with the word, Emily. Connor paused. I don't know who Emily is. But a corner of his heart, where the memory of his little sister who passed away when he was only 15 years old, suddenly ached. She also had a pink dress, also had a doll, and also called him, Connie. And now, standing in the middle of this land, watching things burn like an unnamed ritual, Connor felt I'm not just a lost person, I'm someone who has witnessed something that shouldn't be seen. He turned and left, not running yet, but go quickly and surely. Sometimes, major silence makes people survive. Only until the click sound, the sound of one of the carts vibrate gently on the tree branch behind, rang out. Connor just started really run. Don't turn around, don't think, just run. And at that time, he started to hear sounds. Light laughter. Not sure whether male or female. Not loud, but as thin as smoke, but clearly there is. Connor ran until he couldn't hear anything anymore. Until my knees start to hurt. Until I can't breathe. He stopped at an old plot of land. Sat down, his heart still refusing to slow down. He didn't say it out loud, but he understood one thing. I just entered a place not meant for humans. And the scariest thing is that it doesn't try to hide itself. It wants to be seen. Movie camera, if you're still listening, you'll understand how Connor feels. When the piece is torn apart by signs so obvious, you no longer doubt, you just pray you leave soon enough. Right finger, please subscribe to the After 0 Hours channel to watch the next part. When Connor begins to understand that what you see is not the end, but just the opening gate to something deeper. Thumbs up like if you've ever felt like a place was not right, just because of intuition. Speech balloon comment if you think the burning carts and dolls are a sign of ritual, or a warning. Repeat button, share this story to remind someone. There are some things you shouldn't go deeper into, even just out of curiosity. Because in the deep forest, not everything is silent because of peace. Sometimes, it is holding its breath waiting for you to step forward. Sometimes, fear doesn't come from seeing something, but from feeling certain that something is seeing you. Connor didn't know exactly when his instincts kicked in. Maybe it was when he turned away from the strange grounds. After seeing the carts hanging from the trees like sacrificial offerings. Maybe it was when a soft laugh rang out among the trees. Or maybe, it was from some invisible gaze that clung to the back of his neck as soon as he entered that place. Whatever it is, that insecurity stuck with him. He left immediately, without stopping, without speaking, without looking back. The flashlight on the backpack is turned on, illuminating every step, but the light only shined a few meters ahead, and the darkness behind seemed to be expanding with each breath he took, closer and closer each time. Connor knew he needed to get as far away from that area as possible. He cut through the forest, did not follow the trail, followed the small dry stream to go deeper to the southeast. I no longer care if the campsite is nice or not, as long as far away from that horror place. Nearly 5 p.m. Connor came to a low ground at the foot of the slope. With a few old trees and a mound of soft soil. He set up camp quickly. Didn't cook, just drank water and sat huddled inside the tent, still holding the flashlight like a crude weapon. The strangest thing is he heard no noise, no birds, no wind, no insects. The feeling of being watched doesn't go away. On the contrary, it becomes clearer. Around midnight, Connor still hadn't slept. His eyes were dry, even though his body was exhausted. His mind kept churning with images of the burning doll, the cloth hanger, Emily, and the stroller hanging like a time trap. He pulled out his phone, even though it was turned off, and opened the photo gallery. He scrolled to an old recording. It was his sister's voice, Emily. Recorded when she was 6 years old. Connor, I promise to protect you always. He had saved that recording on his phone since 2015. Since the day Emily died in a car accident, a collision that Connor always believed if he had driven 10 seconds slower that day, things would have been different. He lived with that guilt for many years. And maybe, that's why I was scared to death when I saw the name, Emily, today. As if the forest knew exactly what he was running from. Connor sighed and was about to turn off the phone when the screen flicker. A message appears. One recent Bluetooth device. Emily's speaker. He froze. The phone currently has no signal, no internet, and certainly, there's no one around here with a Bluetooth speaker called Emily. Connor immediately turned off the phone. At this time, rustling noises outside began to be heard. Not the wind, not a broken tree branch. The footsteps were very light and slow, like someone was walking around the tent. He stopped breathing. My heart beats like it's about to burst my chest. The flashlight placed next to it turned on immediately. He panned in all directions inside the tent, the light trembling. Already the footsteps stopped. Silent. Connor pressed himself against the tent, his ears pressed against the canvas. A light breath, very close. A click sound. Like someone lightly touching the aluminum frame of the tent with their fingernails. He held his breath, his hand clenching the flashlight until it turned white. 1 minute, 2 minutes. Already, complete silence. Connor couldn't sleep all night. He sat up straight, his eyes never leaving the tent door. The sky gradually brightens. Rays of light creep through the leaves like eyes of hope. He walked out, legs shaking, face pale, but no one was there. No footprints. No strange marks. Nothing. Except a small toy supermarket cart. Lying on his side under a nearby bush. On the handle is a pink ribbon. Movie camera, are you still listening to this? You see, Connor doesn't just face something strange in the woods. He has to facing the same old pain that he had buried for so long. Right finger subscribe to the After 0 Hours channel to watch the next part. When Connor must choose. Continue to hide. Or go back to find solutions to seemingly unexplainable things. Thumbs up like if you've ever felt an invisible gaze watching you. Even though there's no one around. Speech balloon comment if you believe that sometimes. The past doesn't need a voice, it just needs a sign to come back. Repeat button share the story to remind someone. What you thought you had forgotten is sometimes just waiting for you in a dark corner. Because some things don't follow you home, they never leave. Not all noises are scary. But when you don't know where it comes from, and it calls out a memory you don't want to remember, it will haunt you forever. It was still pitch dark when Connor opened his eyes. He wasn't sure how long he had been asleep. The sleeping bag was damp and cold. The back of the shirt was sticky with sweat. And the tent smelled of nylon and damp soil. His hand still tightened around the flashlight from the night before, as if the old fear hadn't left. At first he thought he just woke up because he was tired. But then, he realized. The surrounding space is too quiet. Too right. No early bird sounds. There was no sound of wind swaying through the trees. Not even the sound of insects chirping like usual. Only suspicious silence, as if the whole forest was holding its breath. Then, Connor heard it. Whistling sound. Slow, light, a simple melody, just 4 notes. Phew, 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 phew. Very far at first, as if someone was wandering in the middle of the forest, accidentally making a sound. Connor strained his ears. Again, same melody, but this time closer. Then again, closer. Every cell in his body tensed up like a string that's been overtuned. He didn't dare move. Eyes stared at the ceiling of the tent, even though they saw nothing but darkness. The hand holding the flashlight started drenched in sweat. The whistle sounded for the 4th time, right next to the outside. Very close. Connor breathed softly. Very light. He could clearly hear his heart beating in his ears, and each step was starting gently glide around the tent. Footsteps are not heavy. No rush. They were slow, steady, as if someone was walking around the small tent. Then stop. Right at his head lay. Connor lay motionless. Don't dare breathe loudly. Don't dare turn around. Time seemed to stop at that moment. 1 second feels like an hour. And then, one matte black lightly printed on the tent wall. Through a thin layer of fabric. Not obvious, but enough to realize. There is a figure standing outside. Don't knock on the door. No name calling. Just standing there. Then another sound rang out. Clack, clack, clack. The sound of nails, or something sharp, gently tapping on the aluminum frame on the side of the tent. Knock 3 times. Stop. Then type again. As if testing your reaction. Connor tightened his grip on the flashlight. But he knew clearly, if he rushed out now, if he opened the tent, if he faced him directly, he was not sure he would survive. By what's out there is no ordinary person. He suddenly remembered something. The 4-note whistled melody is the melody that his sister, Emily, used to whistle when she fell asleep. She often whistled it in the car, in her room, and even in the hospital, before she passed away. And now, in the middle of the forest, 4 in the morning, when he was sure no one knew he was here, that melody rang out. Once again. Phew, 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 phew. This time, right next to the tent. Connor felt his spine stiffen, eyes stinging. I don't know if it's because of tears, or because of the nameless emotions filling my chest. Scared, missed, hurt, and angry at myself. He whispered almost without a sound. "You with me?" No answer. Just the sound of footsteps receded. Slowly. Then disappeared into the night. He lay there, wide awake, until the first light of dawn penetrated the tent fabric. Connor didn't take his eyes off the place where the shadow once stood. When it was bright enough, he tremblingly unzipped the tent and walked out. Nobody. No footprints. There was just a small object lying on the ground, right in front of the tent door. A chalk doodle, on an old piece of cardboard. The drawing is a circle, 2 people. One big, one small, holding hands, standing under a tree. Above is the immature handwriting. You and me, we will never be apart. Connor couldn't say anything. His knees buckled. He burst into tears. For the first time since Emily died, he didn't cry out of guilt. But for the first time, you feel forgiven. Movie camera, if you're still listening, you probably feel something in your chest, fear, pain, and a very real feeling that there are people who have left, but have never left you. Right finger, please subscribe to the After 0 Hours channel to continue following Connor's journey, as he tries to better understand the signs and what is really present in that forest. Thumbs up like if you believe that memories can become calls, both in dreams and in the deep woods. Speech balloon comment if you've ever heard a familiar sound when you least expected it. Repeat button share to remind someone. There are words that haven't been said yet, but there may still be a chance to be heard, even if it's by a whistle in the night. Because love doesn't disappear. It just changes shape and sound. When you run in the dark, you're not just running from what's chasing you. You're also running from the deepest part of yourself, where you hide the things you don't want to face. Connor stood silently before the pale morning light that was beginning to creep up through the treetops. It's not quite dawn yet, but the night is fading, like a bruise about to fade. After last night with the strange whistling sound, the sound of footsteps around the tent, and the hand-drawn cart appearing outside, I know I can't stay here any longer. The backpack was packed in a few minutes. The tent was not removed. He left it behind. He also no longer feels any regret about those material things. Now, he just wanted to leave this place. Right away. Holding the flashlight tightly, he walked quickly in the direction he remembered was the trail. The morning wind brushed his cheeks. Cold but not bitter. Like someone's invisible hand gently reminded, go away. Don't come back. I don't run. Not yet. Just walk quickly. Very fast. Until that sound returned. At first, it was just an hour, crunch, very light on the back. Connor stopped. Silent. Nothing. He continued walking, this time listening more clearly. There's still something, but this sound doesn't sound like normal human footsteps. It has no rhythm, uneven, not like thump, thud, thud, like someone running. Which is rustle, rustle, sharp, hiss, rustle, rustle? Like many people, or something, were slithering behind him. Don't go. Don't run. That cow. Connor froze. My back is covered in cold sweat. He didn't want to turn back. But his body betray you. His neck rotates. Flashlight shines backwards. Nothing. But suddenly, the flashlight light slowed down a bit, as if something had just passed through the light. He turned his head sharply forward and run. At that time, there was no longer any room for calm. Connor ran as fast as he could through bushes, sharp rocks and tree roots protruding from the ground. He didn't know where he was running. He just knew away from the thing that was crawling after him. And it, still following. The rustling sound behind me was getting closer and closer. But what makes him paralyzed with fear? It's not the noise, it's the volume. Not one, not two. It's a lot. Is a lot. Many things were crawling behind him. And worst of all, they have no breathing sounds. No steam, air. There was only the sound of bodies rubbing against the trees. His legs started to go numb. Lungs burned from the cold air. The heartbeat resounded like a war drum in the chest. He slipped and fell once. His pants were torn. His knees were bleeding, but he still didn't stop. As soon as he stood up, the flashlight fell from his hand and rolled away. Extinguished. Now he was completely in the dark. There is no more light. There is no other sound besides the sound of crawling is getting closer and closer. Connor ran in the dark. Hands swing wildly to support tree branches. Eyes opened wide, trying to find some natural light, but the forest was still as dense as a tightly closed mouth. Then, like a miracle, a small light appeared. Very weak, but it's light. Connor rushed towards it like a drowning man reaching for his hand. It's a sea of wood. The old wooden sign. The letters are faded, but still has the hand-engraved words. Exit down right arrow. He did not hesitate. Turned sharply to the right. Plunge down the dirt slope. The more you run, the sound behind you is farther away. It's as if they can't leave that area. As if them belongs there. And he had just escaped from a ritual that had not yet been completed. Finally, he collapsed on an old dirt road, where there used to be tire tracks. His breath seemed to be pulled out of his body. His hands trembled, eyes blurred by tears, not sure if because of pain, because of fear, or because He is still alive. Connor lay there for a long time. And as dawn rose, he took the last shaky steps back to the temporary housing area near the construction site. No one picked him up. No one asked where he went all night. There was only silence, and his own blank look in the mirror. But in that eye, there was something that wasn't there before. Faith. That he had just escaped something that was not of this world. Movie camera, are you still here? You just heard about Connor's escape in the dark, and if your heart was beating faster than usual when he lost the light, then you get the idea. Fear doesn't always come from what you see. Sometimes, it comes from sounds that you don't dare turn your head to look at. Right finger subscribe to the After 0 Hours channel to watch the next part. When Connor starts asking questions, is what he sees real? Or is it a message that he must understand? Thumbs up like if you've ever had the feeling of something behind you that you can't explain. Speech balloon comment if you think the forest is more than just nature, it is memories. Fears and unfinished business. Repeat button and share to remind someone. There are times when you decide to run, not because of weakness, but because you still have a chance to live. Because darkness isn't always the place where you get lost, sometimes it's the place that's trying to hold you back. When you are forced into complete silence, you will discover that the scariest thing is not the approaching footsteps, but the echoing thought in your head. What if they see me? Connor slid through a thick bush, his knee hitting the rock hard, tearing it so deep it bled. But he felt nothing but panic. The darkness behind me was like a black water flowing in, bringing with it the sound of crawling and wordless breaths. In front of him was a large tree, as wide as a long dining table. Roots spread out like claws digging deep into the ground. Below the base there is a natural, narrow hollow, covered with rotten leaves, mud and dry branches. Not enough space for one person to fit in, if you cower like a trembling animal waiting for the storm to pass. I don't think. Just get in. Bo. Hide the flashlight. Lie down on your stomach. Use your hands to pull leaves and soil over your back. My heart beat so fast it felt like my chest would burst. The pain in my knees, stomach, and chest started to come back. But he gritted his teeth without groaning. Because they are coming. The sound of footsteps hitting the ground was uneven. Some are heavy. Some are light. Some don't quite touch down, as if their feet aren't legs at all. Connor closed his eyes, even though I know that closing my eyes in the dark won't help anything. Doing so will help me trick yourself into thinking you have disappeared from this world. The sound of breathing is very light, but clearly, like the wind passing through my neck. They are gliding close. Then, a sound like the sound of wood rubbing against stone. Krrrk. Connor held his breath. A cough almost rose up in his throat, but he forced it down with all his soul. Something just sat on top of the tree, right above your head. He felt it clearly. The pressure on the ground caused the roots of the tree to vibrate slightly. And something was breathing thin but icy air. It smelled not human smell. No sweat smell. No earthy smell. It was something like rusty metal and rotting fabric. Already, it let out a low hiss. Not human language. Not animal sounds. It's the sound as if a memory was being stripped from someone's mind, then torn to shreds. Connor clenched his teeth. His eyes watered. He didn't know how much longer he could endure, and he didn't know if he wanted to continue if what was sitting on his head has a face that he never dares to look at. 1 minute, 2 minutes. Then it stood up. The footsteps continued, but this time, more. 3, 4, 5 different directions. They go around the tree. Slow, slow, like smelling, like choosing, like waiting. Connor thought of Emily. He thought of his mother. He thought of his father, who passed away when he was too young to remember his laughter. And then, something strange happened. 1 water drops dripping down from the branches above your left cheek. Not cold, odorless, but in that moment, it made him feel, be protected. No matter where it comes from. No matter who it comes from. Something was keeping those creatures from seeing him. 10 minutes, maybe 20. Then they retreated. There is no termination sound. There were no screams, roars, or back-crawling sounds. They simply disappeared. The air began to move again. The wind passed by again. The sound of insects, faint but real, returned. Connor was in no hurry to get out. He lay there for a while longer, as if he left early, the nightmare will drag you down again. When he sat up, it was already dusk. The weak light filtered through the trees, illuminating his face full of mud and tears. His eyes were red, his hands were shaking, and his heart, still beating. He survived. It's not because you're strong. It's not because he runs fast. But because something, or someone, wasn't allowing those things to get to him. Movie camera, if you've heard this far. You're in the deepest part of the story. No longer a ghost story. No longer a scary forest, but a silent dialogue between life, memory, and a soul finding its way back. Connor didn't just hide under the tree. He ran away from the collapse in his heart. From all the things he didn't have the courage to name. Right finger subscribe to the After 0 Hours channel to watch the next part. When Connor decides to face. Not run anymore. Thumbs up like if you've ever had a moment where you lay still and prayed to something, even if you didn't know if it heard you. Speech balloon comment if you think there are times. Silence is the loudest scream to beg for life. Repeat button and please share this story, not just because it's scary, but because maybe someone needs to be reminded. Even if you are buried in the ground, there is still hope in the sky. Because a tree stump is not just a place to hide, sometimes. It is the arm of someone who loved you reaching out for the last time. When you find your way out, you don't just escape the woods. You step out of the very fear that has held you back for so many years. The cold morning wind blew through the trees when Connor finally arrived, crawled out of the shelter under the tree. Covered in mud, hands shaking and knees bleeding. He still didn't dare stand up right away. Before his eyes was a dark forest. Tall, straight tree trunks like thousands of silent witnesses. Everything seems more peaceful, but there is a peace that makes people dare not believe. Connor couldn't hear anything anymore. No crawling sound, no whistles, no dull breathing sounds at the back of the neck. But that silence made him even more wary. All his senses at this moment were like the instincts of a hunted animal. Eyes looking for a way out. Ears listening, heart beating erratically. He slowly crawled through the layer of rotting leaves, pulled himself up, and began to walk, very lightly. His legs were numb and bleeding. One shoelace was broken. The hem of his shirt was torn. But he still walked, because stopping now means choosing to stay forever with things that do not belong to humans. After about 15 minutes of walking in silence, Connor's eyes suddenly caught something among the tree roots. An old, tilted wooden sign. On it is a hand-carved inscription. Faded over time. Trail up right arrow. His heart skipped a beat. He walked faster, almost running even though his legs were barely able to. Every time I step, it feels like a knife cutting into my thumb. But he doesn't care. In front of him is the first sign of the outside world. When he saw the old dirt road, where he had passed on the morning of the first day, Connor burst into tears. No sound, no sobbing, just tears flowed uncontrollably, rolling over the cheek, over the chin, falling to the wet soil under your feet. He sat down on the edge of the road. The sky gradually brightened, weak sunlight slipping through the leaves. Familiar sounds, birds, insects, wind through dry branches, began to return. But with Connor, everything now sounds like the first time. His hands hugged his head. He is no longer the man who walked into the forest 3 days ago with a vacuum, a utility knife and a dream of a spiritual vacation. Now, you as a survivor, a person who entered a place uninvited, witnessed something no one should see, and carried with him a fracture that could not be completely healed. Connor doesn't know how many people have been in the same situation as him. He wasn't sure what really happened in that forest. Were the things he saw, heard, felt, just hallucinations? Or is it some invisible ritual? A place that holds the memories of souls who did not pass on. An unnamed ritual, and he was just a passerby. But it's also because it doesn't have a name. That's why it can happen again at any time. With anyone. As Connor trudged along the trail back to the construction site camp. The sun was already rising. The workers were smoking, lighting the stove, or just waking up. No one paid attention to him, a dirty man. Blood on his hands and torn clothes. No one asked. No one knows. He quietly entered the old wooden house, closed the door, and sat down on the floor. His eyes stared blankly at the wooden wall in front of him. The gaze of a person left a world that others did not believe existed. He opened the phone. Still no signal. But at that moment the machine vibrated slightly. A Bluetooth notification appears. Emily's speaker has connected. Connor stared at the screen. Then he quietly turned off the phone and placed it on the floor. Not out of fear, not because of refusal, but because in the end, he accepted. Movie camera, if you're still listening, you're not just hearing a horror story. You have just accompanied a man on a journey freedom from fear, phobia, and ultimately forgiveness. Connor had walked into a place he shouldn't have been, but when I walked out, he left there a part of his old self, the part that lived with guilt, loneliness and denial of the past. Right finger subscribe to the After 0 Hours channel to watch the final part, when Connor chooses, forget, or return to end it all. Thumbs up like if you've ever had a moment of escaping something so dark that you didn't dare tell anyone. Speech balloon comment if you believe that there are places, once you enter, you will never completely leave. Repeat button share the story to remind someone, survival is not always victory, but always an opportunity to start again, differently. Because there are paths that don't lead you back to the old place, but bring you back to yourself. The worst thing after living through horror isn't the nightmares. It's the looks in other people's eyes when they don't believe you lived through it. Connor sat up straight on the hard chair in the town police station. His hands were clasped tightly together. His clothes had been changed, but they were still dirty. And an old scratch that hadn't completely healed on his knee was showing below the leg of his makeshift pants. The fluorescent light above his head made his face more pale, his eyes deep set from insomnia. The officer sitting opposite, his name is Malone, a middle-aged man with a slightly bulging belly and a monotone voice as if every story he had ever heard was the same. Take notes slowly and without enthusiasm. So, you said you saw a camp. What's there? A supermarket cart hanging from a tree? Connor nodded, his hands gripping the edge of the chair. Not one, 4. There were ropes, burning dolls, and something that looked like a sacrificial ritual. It wasn't a normal campsite. It was purposely set up as a warning. Malone put down his pen and sighed. Look, Connor, I don't doubt that you had a scary experience, okay? Maybe it was exhaustion, dehydration, or something you took before going into the woods? Connor clenched his hands. I don't do drugs. I didn't say that. Malone smiled faintly. It's just, you're alone, deep in the woods, lack of sleep. What you saw could just be a combination of stress and imagination. Connor looked straight into his eyes. I don't imagine a whistle at 4 in the morning. I don't imagine a figure crawling behind me. I don't imagine blood on my pants and teeth marks on my biceps. He pulled up his sleeve. Black bruises with a slight cut remain. Not deep, but clear, like someone tried to touch him with something sharp. Malone looked over and nodded slightly. It could be a tree branch. Connor almost jumped up from his chair. Do you think I made all of this up? Do you think I made up the story about being chased? About a ritual in the middle of the forest? About the images I can't forget every time I close my eyes? Officer Malone sat still, unresponsive. Then he sighed. I'm not saying you're lying. But there's no evidence. There's no witnesses. There's no video. No specific coordinates. You left the trail. You went alone. And you came back panicking. We can't open an investigation just because of a feeling of being followed. Especially in that area. We met a few homeless people or vagrants. They set up camp in strange ways. But no one was injured. No missing people. No crime. Connor hung his head, not out of frustration with Malone, but because of the feeling empty is spreading throughout the chest. So, you won't report? Malone shook his head and picked up his coffee cup. I'll note it as a suspicious experience. But don't officially open a file. If you're concerned, you can leave town, change jobs. Don't go back to that area again. Connor left the station with a flimsy piece of paper, remarking unilaterally, no unusual behavior verified. He held the paper. The wind blew it away, almost not wanting to keep it. People don't believe him. No one. On the way back to the motel, Connor passed by a small restaurant. Through the glass frame, he saw 3 young men laughing loudly, one of whom was wearing a reserve police uniform. As he passed by, he faintly heard, I heard that the guy saw a ghost and whistled, then ran away. His face turned pale. The whole group burst into laughter. Connor stood silently in the middle of the road. His heart tightened, not out of anger, but because helplessness. The feeling of being hunted in the middle of the night, bleeding, trembling in a tree hole. All are now reduced to jokes in the breakfast bar. That night, in a cold wooden room, Connor sat alone. He opened his phone and scrolled through the videos recorded before losing signal. Nothing is clear. There was a shaky recording. Some blurry images, and the sound of him breathing rapidly. He reopened old messages from Emily, his sister, from many years ago. Last message. Don't go alone anymore. I often dream that you're lost. Connor put down the phone. Tears fell from his eyes again, not from fear, not from anger, but because, feeling left behind. Not in the woods, but between society, place people only believe when there is evidence. Not the feeling of survival. Movie camera, if you're still listening, let me get this straight. Connor doesn't need you to trust him. But he needs someone listen. No judgment. Don't laugh. Don't pretend comfort. Right finger, please subscribe to the After 0 Hours channel to watch the finale. When Connor decides whether to live as a forgotten man, or to go back. Record the evidence, and reclaim the truth. Thumbs up like if you've ever been hurt because others laughed at your true fears. Speech balloon comment if you believe that there are things that cannot be proven, but you know they're true. Repeat button, share this story to remind someone. Just because no one believes you, doesn't mean what you're going through isn't real. Because fear is real. Not in the stories, but in the nights you can't sleep. It's not always the strongest person who survives. Sometimes, it's the person who dares to retreat at the right time, and is brave enough not to turn back. 3 weeks after leaving those woods, Connor moved away. He didn't tell anyone, didn't report it to his workplace, and didn't share it on social networks. He just packed his things, returned the keys, and quietly left town, as if his life never really belonged there. No one in the local area remembers his name. The construction workers only mentioned it briefly, then forgot. The police did not call back. No one investigated. No one returned to the forest. And the strange thing is, Connor isn't bothered by it anymore. He rented a small room near the mountains in the northern part of the state, where there are pine forests. Natural light in the early morning. And the old man selling bread asked him every morning, "Did you sleep well?" Connor lives quietly, not running away from the past, but also not letting it drag him to the bottom. Every morning he makes coffee and writes in a small notebook, a line, a feeling, a lesson. On the 21st day, he wrote a sentence that he later often shared with those who needed to hear. There are places that are not meant for humans, even if just to pass by. One time, the innkeeper, Mr. David, 63 years old, a former forest ranger, sat drinking tea with him on the porch. Connor recounts the story in the woods. For the first time with someone who doesn't judge. Mr. David did not smile. Unquestioning, he just nodded. Do you know why many old people in this town don't go deep into the forest? Connor shook his head. Because they understand. Nature is not just soil, rocks, trees. It has memories. There are things that existed before humans even knew how to name them. And if you see something that doesn't make sense, don't try to explain it. Just go. Just leave quietly. That's how you'll be spared. Connor was silent. I understand. From that day on, he no longer dreamed of black shadows or whistles. But I still hear Emily's voice, in the afternoons when the wind comes through the window. Not because his sister really appeared, but because the nostalgia was no longer painful. It's about connection. One night, he played the old recording, Emily's voice at age 6. Connor, I miss you. Don't go alone anymore. For the first time, he didn't cry. He smiled. Little by little, Connor began share your story again. But not for those who like thrillers or ghost stories. It's with people I used to feel despised when I shared my true fears. He blogs, sent anonymous mail, appeared in a small podcast about wild survival. And then, his story began to spread. It's no longer a strange thing in the middle of the forest. Which is a warning about respecting limits that humans should not cross. A year later, Connor received a letter from a 17-year-old boy named Miles. I used to want to run away from home and live hidden in the forest. But after listening to your story, I understand that not all silence is peaceful. Thank you for telling it, not in a horror way, but in a way that makes people understand. Silence is sometimes the final warning. Connor held the letter, his hands shaking slightly. I know, everything you went through was not meaningless. No need for anyone to confirm. No need for anyone to believe. Because he lived. And now, he helps others survive. Movie camera, if you're still listening, I want you to know, Connor is not a hero. He didn't defeat the monster. Do not break pagan rituals. Do not record ghosts for television. But you survived, and chose to turn away just in time. In a world where courage is celebrated as confrontation, Connor teaches you the opposite, that retreating is also brave. That not all fears need to be overcome. There are fears that you just need to listen to continue living. Studio microphone. So if you're considering setting foot in an exotic place, or are curious about something you don't understand, remember Connor's words. If you see something that doesn't make sense, don't look further. Leave, and don't come back. Right finger. Subscribe to the After 0 Hours channel to pick up new stories, not just fear. But the lesson is survival. A way for us to connect with humanity in the most absurd moments. Thumbs up like if you believe sometimes listening to your instincts is what keeps you alive. Speech balloon. Comment if you've ever had to give up something not because of weakness, but because you know, I deserve peace more than answers. Repeat button and share this story for someone who needs to hear. Not every trip needs to end in victory. If you have a trip, just come back, that's enough. Because there are places, the right thing you can do is not to enter a second time.